if the demand for data insights, like that kind of Q&A, went up by 10x or 100x or even 1,000x, can we possibly rely on this manual way of mining for insights from your data warehouse? Welcome back, Robert. Welcome to episode 2.
Yes, I'm very excited. Should we get right into it?
Yeah, let's get into it.
All right. So a lot of stuff has happened this week. I feel like it was acquisition week. No?
The past few weeks, yeah. Past 4 weeks.
What? Neon and Databricks, Hex acquiring Hashboard, Informatica, Data World, Number Station. What else?
Yep.
I need to check.
Some fundraisers.
Some fundraisers, yeah.
ClickHouse, Hex.
Should we just go through them?
Yeah.
All right. Tell me about. I mean, since we're somewhat proximate to the Neon folks, what happened with Neon? What happened with Databricks? Also, I want to know like why it makes sense, because I'm reading this and I'm like, my first reaction is this is bizarre, but I mean I guess I can see it, but I just haven't tied together all the pieces yet. But I'm sure you have your own take on this.
Yeah. So we got the chance to work with Nikita Shamgunov, who is currently the CEO of Neon, back when he was still a partner at Koza Ventures. And we worked with Nikita pretty closely during our hyperquery days. And Nikita has been amazing to us and gave us a lot of great feedback and helped us grow the company. So nothing but good things to say about Nikita. But I think this acquisition news was quite surprising, and at a first glance, it seemed kind of weird that Databricks is acquiring an OLTP company. But I think upon a second look, it might make more sense, and it is making more sense to me. And so Databricks, being one of the canonical data companies in our space, I think it has made a few really good acquisitions in the past, say, year or so, or a year or two. And it's clear that Databricks wants to move away from just purely being this data lakehouse company into being a data plus AI company. And part of that was through acquiring Mosaic ML, which allowed it to go into the foundation model and LLM model territory. And so that really signified its movement towards that space. And I think this is sort of maybe act 2 to that movement, that chess move, a series of chess moves. And Neon being a serverless Postgres provider, I think it really is cementing itself as one of the de facto providers of serverless Postgres for AI agents. So I think what's happening is there are a few vibe coding and AI-based agents building applications. Like Vercel has V0, Bolt, Bolt.new, and Lovable.dev. These services allow folks to easily build applications using pure English and just generic software applications. And I think these applications need a way to easily acquire databases to use. And I think Neon is extremely well positioned for one of the de facto ways to get an agent to spin up a new Postgres instance and start using it as a production grade database. And the fact that Neon is serverless, I think it allows one could be like a human or an agent to really rapidly scale up and scale down these instances. So I think the architecture is perfectly suited for this purpose. So I think it's really in the thesis of, in an agentic world, what infrastructure is necessary for you to really capture a lot of the value here. And there is definitely a data play here, and a serverless Postgres definitely fits in this thesis.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. So I just have my immediate reaction to this news on reading it. My thought was just like, not even the vibe coding side of things, but like there is like this parallel between OLTP and OLAP. I don't have a good sense of what it looks like to build agents against Postgres, because that's not really what we do. But I guess I'm getting to, you know how like OLTP has ORMs, right?
Yeah.
And OLAP has a semantic layer, and they're not like that different.
I guess
sense, right?
abstractly they're about the same thing.
Yeah, like they provide this like gated programmatic way of interfacing with a fully functional Turing complete SQL database, right? But and so I guess I'm wondering, I'm just kind of going off the cuff here, Joseph, but like Databricks, it feels like there's something there. Like Databricks going into OLTP feels like it's an expansion into like a unified consolidation play against like both. Like as an agent, maybe you want the agent to be able to both access data and then also access transactions, and then having like a unified interface against both would make a lot of sense to me. But this this might be like not at all what they're thinking, but I can't help but see some sort of parallels here.
Yeah, who knows what they're actually thinking, and to some degree, you are making some shots in the dark here, and everybody, right? Like nobody really knows how the market is going to evolve. So, but you still need to make your chess moves. So it does seem like that, and I think even Snowflake is going into more transactional data processing as well. So I think once companies grow with a singular wedge, and then they expand their wedge to multiple offerings, and if you are starting to tap out of the OLAP data space, then naturally you want to move contiguously to both OLTP and also into something that is contiguous in a different direction. Like for example, like AI agents. I think last episode you said AI people are essentially data people, just doing slightly different things, right? And if that's the case, then I think buying Neon is sort of a move in both directions. It's a direction in the AI direction and also a direction in the OLTP direction. So it's a pretty good strategic move if you think about it from that perspective, from an optionality perspective.
This makes me wonder, like there's so much bundling and consolidation that seems to be happening as a result of AI. Last week we talked with Madison Faulkner from NEA, that Tobiko meetup, right? I remember she brought up this interesting point, and this is not related to OLTP, OLAP, but she was purporting that there would be some sort of consolidation of like ML and analytics finally, right? But it's interesting because I see this theme of like bundling and consolidation seem to be easier with AI, or like perpetuated by AI or something. But you're getting at one of the canonical directions that people can go into to eat more of the market. But I wonder if this is more of like a systemic dynamic that exists.
Probably is a systemic dynamic. I think folks thought about things more naively back, a few years ago, where if you said like data infrastructure is consolidating, then you just thought, okay, Snowflake is going to do both OLAP and OLTP in one database. That's like the naive way of thinking about it. And then the same thing with Databricks, right? Like, okay, you have a lakehouse, so you should be able to do both, like not only structured data, but also unstructured data, but not only OLAP queries, but also OLTP queries. That's like sort of the more naive way to think about it. Just like, let's just expand the scope of the database, which happens all the time, right? That's just a natural progression of a database company. But the non-naive, the more sort of novel way that this has panned out is that AI is becoming this new interface for humans to interact with. And if the interface changes, then the underlying abstraction could change as well. So if the human was interacting directly with a database, then as a human, I guess it makes more sense in some scenarios that like one database does everything. But if you're an AI agent, and if the human was interacting with an AI agent, then I don't really care if this AI agent uses two systems, because it's just going to handle things for me. So the AI agent using Snowflake for everything versus it uses Snowflake plus Neon for some other things doesn't really matter for the human as much. So I think having this abstraction in between the human and the data systems allows a company to actually expand, and it doesn't have to generally be contiguous with your product offering. I think this is what's one of the things that's happening. Like previously, you had sort of one of the canonical ways to build a SaaS company is you just have one product and the product starts to grow and it just becomes like a monstrosity. But I think what's happening right now in the market is like you have a lab or like a product lab or you have a company and then you have multiple offerings. You have multiple offerings of different models. You have basically different SKUs, and that's strange, right? Because that's like contrary to everything that the SaaS boom has taught us, which is just build one. Just be Figma, just build one Figma, build like one Notion, and that's going to be it for your entire company. But now it's okay. You have this multiple SKU world, and that has a lot to do with the fact that I think with AI agents as one of the interfaces, then it doesn't really matter for the end user whether you have multiple SKUs or a single SKU, because the agent is interacting with the software. And so that's from that perspective, I think the psychological difference between humans using software and humans using agents, and then the agents using the software is a profound change. And it's something that you alluded to last episode when you said you need the data systems to actually be built natively for agents and not retrofit things that have been built for humans and then just like add like an agent on top of it. I think it's a similar concept here.
So interesting, because I mean, I never thought about it in the way that you articulated it now, but like, I guess you can really hop skip a lot further. And I'm wondering if like all of our intuition around product building is maybe wrong in some sense because of this, because like the unifying thread between SKUs is now the LLM, whereas all of our intuition is built on like the unifying thread being like, I don't know, product proximity or like user journey. I don't even know how to articulate this, but there does seem to be that shift, and it seems like traditional product thinking or design knowledge must have some sort of reckoning as a result.
Yeah, probably. I think, I mean, at every platform shift, this probably happens. Like we're a little bit too young to have experienced the internet boom, but we did experience the mobile boom, and we were still a little bit too young to be. We weren't really not in the workforce fully when that transition was happening. Like I was still in high school, but I would imagine folks building on the web or for desktop had to really quickly realize, okay, mobile is its own thing, and in particular for mobile, having an application that had fewer features but had like higher virality made a lot more sense than a web application that was more fully fledged, right? So like from that perspective, a lot of web companies and like desktop software companies probably thought like this app thing is a joke. This is like a fucking toy, and then they got their lunch just eaten away by these app companies. So from that perspective of the same thing, if I were the sort of the web-based data companies, like software companies, then I would think, okay, these fucking idiots running around, these AI agents don't have a lot of the GUI capabilities that a traditional data system has. So these companies are just going to get destroyed. But maybe the counter is like, no, this is a new paradigm, and what matters is that the agent knows how to do a lot of different things rather than it's very specific for a particular like GUI-based workflow. I think that's one of the things that we're thinking through, and especially because I think there is a scaling law in the sense of if you talk to researchers from OpenAI or Anthropic, I think one very common thread exists, which is you would think that building sort of more like an expert system that is really good at like doing one task at coding, that would outperform like a more generalized model that just has many more parameters, but it just knows how to do many more things. But it does seem like in actuality, in terms of performance of like accuracy, not speed, but for accuracy standpoint, it does seem like having like a massive and general neural net outperforms like more specialized neural nets, which is like completely contrary to like human intuition. And from that perspective, then if you think about it, then like, of course, an agent that knows how to do more and more things is in actuality the better agent. So you have to build your agents that way. And so that's like very, very different from software building, because software building is like, you need to do this like thing very, very well in this niche. And then if you put too many features inside, then the product becomes a monstrosity, right? But that's just because the human brain can't take too much GUI complexity because of the limitations of our brains. But if you build software for agents, so let's just call them like headless software, like without much GUI, like just like it's a bunch of API calls, then the agent knows how to handle this complexity pretty well. So like having more capabilities is actually better than building things like beautifully with the GUI, right? So I think from that perspective, the best advice for building a product might get shifted.
Yeah, and like I guess I can see both the paradigm shift from like akin to mobile coming out in the user experience. Now you have, I never thought about it that way. I never thought about it, how it was so dramatic that now you can just talk to a thing. Like right now, it just seems like a toy in some ways, but of course, like that's as profound a shift as going to mobile, right? But then on top of that change, there's also the shift. I mean, it's similar to like the shift in building products that are physical versus building them on a computer, right? Like, you just have to think about it drastically differently. There are different constraints, there are different scaling laws, there are different dynamics that govern what makes an object successful. But yeah, I guess with this in mind, I'm maybe we should talk through some of the other acquisitions, because I feel like there's a theme here, and I can't quite tease apart what it is yet, Joseph. But I feel like if we talk about enough things, in the same way that LLMs will do better if you just give them more data, maybe if we just keep talking about all the acquisitions, we'll get to something interesting.
Yeah, sure.
So what else? Hex acquired Hashboard, and they raised their Series C. And you had this thesis around everything becoming BI, which we've talked about before. But
yeah, I think everything becoming a BI is really Ben Stansel's full blog post,
right?
And but of course, this is not a new idea, but it just that phrase is extremely catchy. This one is a consolidation play, and of course, we were in the data notebook space, so we have some views here. I think what we have found is that data notebooks, even though they're amazing, being able to do exploratory analytics with SQL and Python in a notebook like shape, the market for that is not super large, just because it's due to a simple fact that there are not that many people who want to use a SQL and Python notebook. It's just as simple as that. From that perspective, you're going to run out of market at some point, and from that perspective, you need to start expanding your workflows, expanding your job to be done in a company. And of course, if you're a notebook company, you're gonna come across situations in which you naturally want more BI-like functionality inside of your tool, including, say, like a semantic layer, including the ability to drag and drop components to make dashboards and data applications and things like that, and really allowing for non-technical users to actually do some self-serving and things like that as well. And we've also seen this story play out for Periscope Data and Mode if you study these companies. So like Mode and Periscope Data, they both started out as like this SQL runner, I think. I mean, this is a little bit before our time. So we didn't actually experience this firsthand, but if you just study the history of these companies, you start out as this SQL runner with like some viz, and then Periscope got acquired, I think, by Sisense, I think, and so that really folded into an actual BI company, and then Mode eventually became like legitimately a BI company, and so from that perspective, yeah, these like ad hoc surfaces and notebook like things eventually become like full on BI products. So this feels very, very obvious that you should be like that company should be going in this direction.
It makes a lot of sense to me too. I mean, we know that Hashboard team, right? But I imagine like the direct thing that they'll be able to help with is their acquisition probably indicates they have some immediate like semantic layer ambitions.
I see.
You
I
know?
see. I see.
I mean, but it's all in the service of like just getting the full AI end-to-end thing over BI working, right? But I wonder if that's the play here.
That is a very reasonable play if you are a BI or BI like company, I would say. But then our play is a little bit different, which is we're not a BI company. We want to be completely AI native, and that has its own challenges, but also has some structural advantages.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm connecting some dots here, Joseph. I feel like, we obviously learned that a difficulty with the notebook space was that there just aren't a lot of people that are willing to use a notebook to do SQL and Python work. But I wonder if this is also kind of going back to our last point around the unified interface. Like, I wonder if this becomes also the biggest barrier to entry for people wanting to use, say, like an AI native analytics tool if you build on something like Hex. Like, simply because it's a notebook, you've already kind of restricted. You've started with an interface that makes it more difficult for non-technical people.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And I think if we have learned anything, I mean, we're pretty technical founders and we didn't really know that much about marketing. But if we, put our technical hat on and try to analyze what really is marketing, I think the fundamental thing about marketing is positioning. Like, how do you position your product? Like, if you position yourself as an SUV, then people who are not so hardcore about outdoorsy things are going to want to buy the product, unless you you say, okay, it's a luxury SUV now, and so you get all the the soccer moms to buy the car, but sports cars, not everybody wants sports cars either. So I think the positioning of what the category of your product is very important. And of course, you could start one way and then expand. But if we learn anything, how you start really matters in what you become. Like Snowflake started out as an analytical query engine plus database, so it really has its focus in analytics, and like Databricks started out as basically a query engine for basically machine learning and AI, right? And so of course it's much better for those workloads, and of course it's less good for analytical workloads. It's not as convenient, really, right? So from that perspective, of course, these two cars claim to do the same thing, but the category is different, so different people want to buy it. And so if you start out as this data notebook, is kind of like a sports car, like the only really people who really love cars, they want this thing, like they want to drive like stick shift, right? And if you started out as a sports car company, it's really hard to say, no, JK, we're, I don't know, Toyota Camry now. Like it's hard to do that.
Yeah, it reminds me of you gave the analogy before when we talked about like BlackBerry versus iPhone too, right? It's like you want to be iPhone, you don't want to be BlackBerry, where you're kind of catering to this like technical white collar group first. Yeah. We've gone through a couple different acquisitions now, and I feel like they're just give me a sec to like orient myself, because OLTP, OLAP, and that's like one kind of more obvious consolidation, but it's also being perpetuated by AI. And now this is like a different, this one is more, I guess, consolidation along the, like, an orthogonal axis where we're just making analytics consolidated, right? So there's also the data catalog acquisitions that have happened recently. Jesus, what is happening?
What is happening? It's a lot of consolidation.
So Informatica went to Salesforce?
Yeah, I think Salesforce.
Is that right?
I guess it's the missing half of Tableau, right? I think Informatica is a full stack data integration and data cataloging and governance and all these things. They provide all these things for larger and legacy organizations, and it does seem like the data integration piece is a piece that is missing from this like Tableau acquisition. So that's from a super high level perspective, and but from a strategic perspective, I guess people have this thesis. Folks are starting to come up with a thesis that metadata is really important, because metadata, like having data about the data assets that you have, is really important for AI. But this is also in the theme of these are traditional data systems trying to tack on this AI play. So who knows if this is going to work out or not type of situation. And so what do you think? What do you think about this? These metadata companies like Data.World and Informatica consolidating, and then of course the strategic buyer is actually being strategic about this. This is likely not just buying the revenue, but it's saying, hey, I own the strategic asset and I could do something with it. And doing something with it is very, very obvious what they want to do with it. They want to do AI with it. But does that make sense to you?
I mean, Joseph, like we did, we ran against all those benchmarks, the SQL benchmarks, like 2 years ago, right? And we found that just having a catalog and injecting the right context gets you to quite robust text to SQL accuracy. And so, like, of course, like, I think the whole industry and everyone and their grandma has figured out that you need a catalog or some sort of central source of truth for all the business context to have a robust text to SQL offering, or just generally a robust AI offering, AI analytics offering. But I remember, like, when you talked to Bob Muglia, right? And he'd mentioned like this knowledge graph idea, which has been like sticking in our heads for like the last year. And I'm thinking like more and more that something is wrong with the catalog. And the graph feels like it's more the right solution, but I can't articulate. Like, it's easy to just say, oh, graph, and then like point vaguely at the fact that connectedness can get you some advantage, but I haven't been able to articulate yet what that advantage looks like. And I think people don't have that intuition, which is why everyone's still anchoring on this catalog.
That is an interesting point. So I think fundamentally the details. So if you're really engineering a system so that the context could get injected correctly into the LLM or the agent, then of course the details matter. Like the very granular details of how that context gets injected. Literally, I mean, prompt engineering is very, very fickle. It's not very robust. So how you do it specifically really matters. So of course the format of how that data gets injected matters. And from that perspective, of course, how it's stored matters, and how it's retrieved, how it's stored and retrieved matters. And it's not super clear to us that like the traditional data cataloging systems, I mean, they probably contain a lot of very useful information, but it's not clear if that's enough. And just because I think data catalogs, I think the killer use cases were basically in governance, like compliance or governance, like data sensitivity and security, and also like financial compliance for banks. Like I think that's what the Calibra really focused on, and so forth. It's really not about the consumption use cases. It was really about governance. And from that perspective, if your killer application on top of your data store is governance, then your data is shaped in a format that adheres to the killer application. And the killer application now is AI. And so the idea is that could we do something with the existing catalog, or are we going to see some creative destruction here? It's kind of like our stance, and I think my stance is likely it's yeah, our stance is just like BI companies introduced the semantic layer as a bundled entity, because you need to have a killer application that necessitates that semantic layer as a concept. And this is precisely why there are not that many semantic layer only companies like Cube or like AtScale or something like that. There are not that many of them. Like there are like literally like dozens or if not hundreds of BI companies, but not that many semantic layer companies, because it's really hard to sell that as a standalone thing. It's probably going to be hard for a standalone data catalog company to layer on like the AI part on top of it and expect it to work. The system has to work in tandem, right? And so it does seem like this is like a story-based acquisition and like an optionality-based. These acquisitions are like story-based or like optionality-based acquisitions, but it doesn't seem like something that will actually result in like a massive amount of creative destruction here.
Yeah, I can see that. Just a meta comment here. It kind of like, as you were explaining this, I find it kind of funny that feel like catalogs went from like the least sexy part of the data stack into apparently now like the darling child of AI. I mean, for now, right? It's gonna. I think, and I think you think it's gonna change in the next few months, especially as we we build our platform and go to market. But what about the other way around? So there was Number Station. I mean, so like obviously we have Informatica going into Salesforce. We also have Number Station going into Elation. You think this is also like it's no longer like an option. It's more like it seems like an acquisition that is aimed at doing the very strategic thing and going after AI as like I mean, if I were Elation, I'd probably be like, we have a catalog and everyone's talking about how the catalog makes AI better. We should go after AI because we've solved the hard part, which is building the catalog.
Yeah, it feels like a talent grab play. It seems like, yeah. So that makes sense for Elation, and maybe for Number Station they thought, okay, actually having access to, first of all, the sales channel into going into all these customers, and then having access to all the metadata already mapped out could be a really good way for them to accelerate their go-to-market. It makes sense high level. And I've been hearing about some companies that are in the market for like a seed, and then they just get acquired by companies because companies are just really, really hungry for AI talent. So from that perspective, maybe, I mean, Number Station it looks like they had great folks. They have great folks. So it does make sense to me that would be the play from the Elation standpoint.
I can see that. Oh, there was also I guess there was also another set of acquisitions, like our friend Kevin, but also the Datadog acquisitions, right?
And this is another consolidation play, but from another contiguous yet orthogonal source, meaning the Datadog is not it's not a data company, but it's contiguous to a data company, I would say. It's adjacent to a data company. What do you think?
I haven't thought about this one at all, but it's weird. I mean, okay, the proximity makes sense to me. Like Metaplane and Datadog makes a lot of sense, right? But Eppo, I guess experimentation. So for people who don't know, Eppo is an experimentation platform that was also acquired by Datadog. But experimentation never seemed like it was part of observability. But I guess it is if you just say like observability is whether an app works, period. And then I guess experimentation is whether the app works like for users.
I see. So yeah, I see. It's kind of like part of the APM paradigm. Then, if you squint, you could technically say that, because APM is a way to measure all sorts of things about the product's health, and the part of that is experimentation data.
Yeah, but it feels like a lot of mental gymnastics to try to get there. But I mean I can see it making sense, but I wonder what they're going to do there. Or maybe it's just like different SKUs, like we were saying before, right?
Yeah. I mean, this does feel like a Databricks entering into the AI space by acquiring Mosaic ML and also acquiring Neon to go into a contiguous but adjacent space. It does feel like that to me, where, if you're a company that observability is effectively a data company, right? You're looking at metrics and traces and logs, and you have different ways to cut that space. You have like a way to consolidate all the logs into one platform. You have APM, and a part of that is getting other data into their platform and their sales force, and getting product data is very important. Getting data from the modern data stack, like from the business intelligence stack, makes a lot of sense, I guess. In terms of like expanding into an adjacent field that is not observability in the traditional sense, but observability from a semantic sense. Like, it has nothing to do with business continuity, but semantically, business intelligence is of course part of observability. Like, if you're thinking about observability over your entire business, you have observability over your metrics and traces and logs from your machine systems, and then you have human systems observability, which is business intelligence. Like, okay, like about like my KPIs about revenue and profit and all these like lagging indicators about my business. Isn't that part of observability? So from a semantic sense, I guess it makes sense. So semantically, it makes sense. And then also from a core competency of the business and being able to sell data systems, like build and sell data systems from a competence sense, I think it makes sense that Datadog will try to acquire all these companies. And okay, so from that perspective, I guess both like Salesforce, the thing that is missing from the data stack is really the data warehouse or data lakehouse. They're really missing that piece. Datadog is also, if they're really expanding horizontally, and like they're missing a data warehouse, especially I think with like players like ClickHouse coming in and taking observability, right? Like they're taking the observability workloads away from Datadog because Datadog is so expensive. So it makes sense for Datadog to try to own a data warehouse. Otherwise, they're going to become like disintermediated or like they're going to be cannibalized by the data warehouses. So they probably desperately want a data warehouse and because they can't buy one and like everything that is out in the market is quite expensive. Or like not played out. So I guess the next best thing is buy like a few companies in that space that are connected to the data warehouse.
I see. And that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, you kind of like dip your toes in the water into the data space, see if it sticks in some way, and then you can kind of extrapolate out what would happen if you did buy a warehouse company.
Let's talk about semantic layers, as it's completely related to all the stuff that we talked about. So I guess just adding a data catalog and then shoving that with AI and then expecting something magical to happen, that's like pretty naive thinking. We probably think also putting a semantic layer that was built for BI and then putting AI and then just calling it, AI for BI, that seems quite naive in the same exact logic, the chain of logic as the catalog logic. But what do you think about this? Like, what do you think is going to happen with this semantic layer plus AI situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and you believe this as well, I believe, but I think it has to get rebuilt from the ground up. But I think the difficulty is this feels like a P is not NP problem. We like to say P is not NP when something is kind of obvious and in hindsight, but actually getting there is quite difficult. But it feels like I don't know what the solution is, but I think once we see it, we'll be like, oh, great, that makes total sense. Because clearly, if you use any of these, and we've talked to folks who are using the semantic layer company AI tools, it theoretically makes sense, right? Like you've somehow like mapped the space with all this semantic information, and you now have this beautifully guardrailed system that has access to just like vetted things, and so can spit out and answer questions. But like it's just not quite flexible. Like, and this kind of brings me back to the concept of the knowledge graph again, which I don't want to get too like highfalutin about this, but like it feels like when you really know what you're looking for, semantic layer perhaps can suffice, but most of the time people don't know exactly what they're looking for. Like most questions, almost by definition, are things where you don't know what you're looking for. And I think when ambiguity is high, value of traversal along a graph to find more loosely connected objects seems like it would be pertinent. But again, like practically speaking, I don't know if this is like, I mean, I doubt this is like something about the underlying data structure. It's not like having a graph DB or something will magically solve this. I think it's like a semantic, like a hierarchical semantic structuring problem or something along those ends, where you figure out the new primitives that work to map the flexibility correctly.
Yeah, hierarchical semantic structuring. I like that. HSS.
Okay, cool. Let's trademark it. We'll write a paper.
HSS. But how do you think about hierarchical semantic structuring? So it's probably not as naive as let's let's shove in the semantic layer or something like that. It has to do with, and like it's not, it's probably not as naive as let's literally just use Neo4j or something, and Neo4j is going to handle like everything for you. It's probably not that. Yeah, it's something probably more sophisticated than that.
Okay, I think a really simple question that you can ask that obviously can't be answered directly by semantic layer is something like why did this metric drop? To some extent, yes, you can have a reasoning engine take all the different dimensional cuts and all the drivers of metrics and like kind of break out that Cartesian product and search through all of them systematically. But I mean, first of all, the LM has to think to do that. But secondly, like you now have this level of non-determinism that is like is that you're trying to work through with the LLM, and it feels like that like the semantic layer alone isn't quite the right shape to solve that problem. Whereas you might want something that actually understands. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but we have analogies, right? So like really deep research came out everywhere, right? But from deep research, we have these like parallelized systems where you can go down all these different rabbit holes, come to a bunch of different answers to a specific question, and get to a like wisdom of the crowd solution that ends up being extremely accurate. I mean, as far as I can tell, right? Like deep research has been phenomenal in Perplexity. And the question is like, how do you take that and then apply the same constraints that you have in analytics, maybe around determinism or around accuracy or what have you. And then how do you adjust the semantic layer such that it fits with that paradigm? And I think that's still like an unsolved question. I think it's even just like an unstated question. I think everybody is just hoping semantic layer catalog, this will solve the AI problem without realizing that there are different kinds of questions and the ones that you would just compose dimensions and measures for to answer. Like, it's not like everyone's just going to be asking, how many users do we have in the US? People are going to be asking much more ambiguous questions. And I think that's where real value comes from, and also where we have no real solution. And now I'm going to get off my soapbox.
But is it possible, okay? Like, is it possible that this is a midwidth curve and that we are overcomplicating things?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Joseph and I talk about this frequently for everyone listening, that I think there are just cycles of midwit that I think we all go through. Maybe if I just use some metaphors, it kind of helps me figure out and make some bets here. Like, I feel like semantic layer is like Legos, right? And yes, you can build a lot of things with Legos, but sometimes you need building materials. And the question is like whether it's like we're solving a problem where, you're just trying to give a toy to a kid, and like Legos actually are an extremely elegant way to give a kid unfettered access to a creation machine, right? Like the components that they need to really like use their creativity as much as they want. And that's the point. Or is it more like, we're trying to build houses and all we have are Legos? Like, I don't know where we sit, but I think depending on where on this spectrum we sit will determine whether or not the semantic layer alone is enough.
There's like a very small point, which is if we think about using LLMs to retrieve and synthesize information from data, like structured data, as something like a search problem, we're stuck in this Yahoo-like world where everybody has to semantically model things, data model things correctly, and then suddenly things start to work. It feels like having a bunch of directories everywhere, like like Yahoo did, is probably not the right answer to organizing a large set of information for consumption. That seems like it's not the right way to do things, especially when the sheer query volume increases. So like I guess in the old world, if you don't have English-based Q&A, then people have to be reliant on BI people, like data analysts, to like make you dashboards and things like that for you. And from that perspective, then just semantically modeling just a small subset of things that really move the needle, like basically just like KPI-based questions, that was sufficient because that's like all you could do. relying on a human system. But if we just thought for a second, just from first principles, if the demand for data insights, like that kind of Q&A, went up by 10x or 100x or even 1,000x, can we possibly rely on this manual way of mining for insights from your data warehouse? Probably not. And so even from that perspective, you probably need something a little bit more automated in building that kind of semantic knowledge in your organization. And that likely has to be more algorithmic and self-learning than just doing semantic modeling.
Yeah. Yeah, like the access pattern changes, and that naturally leads to some sort of refactoring of the information architecture and the access and like how you should be constructing things. Yeah, and we'll see. Like maybe it turns out to be something as damning as being Yahoo, like starting as a semantic layer company or a catalog company, and it may end up being something as damning as being like Yahoo and sticking with that pattern, but it might end up just being the scaffolding that you use to build up Google, right? So I won't die on this hill, but obviously we have our own bet, but it's hard to see through the fog.
It's hard to tell.
On this point, Joseph, something that we've encountered a lot is when talking with investors, we've had a lot of we've noticed that people have a really hard time trying to pick between companies to invest in. Do you have any thoughts on why this is? And I think this kind of relates to
investing in the data plus AI space.
Yeah, in the data plus AI space.
Yeah.
I mean, if my confusion isn't any like indication that it must be hard for investors too, even as a practitioner that's trying to build a company.
I mean, it would be hard for us too. I think if we were investors, even though we know a lot about the space, it will probably be very, very difficult for us to invest in the winner, just because, first of all, the sheer volume of companies that are out there that are purportedly doing data plus AI. It could be automated, like an AI data engineer or AI data analyst or something like that. The ideas are easy, but the execution is hard. The navigation through the idea maze is hard, and also I think it's like a mid-width curve idea. I think, which is it's very, very obviously a good idea. So you would folks would just jump in to solve this very obvious problem. But at the same time, it is actually an excellent idea, just really hard to execute on. And then maybe the naysayers are really in the middle part of the mid-width curve and overcomplicating things. And so from that perspective, of course, you have a lot of competitors. I think there are literally like 100 AI data analysts out there in the market. But there's like one every week. There's like one every week popping up. But the idea is how do you cut through the noise, and how do you actually build a sustainable system, and how do you build a system that is differentiated, right? And like, how do you build a differentiated system? How do you, and from that perspective, of course, you have to get away from this like semantic layer plus AI is going to solve everything mentality, because you can't build a differentiated architecture and method if you just follow everybody else. And I think this whole data game is it's not only just a function of just building things so that it works. It needs to be built in a way that gets the maximal adoption from the community. And I think the adoption part is really hard. So I think if I were to invest, you want to invest in a team that will get data folks to adopt you. And from that perspective, you need a certain level of experience and gravitas in the space and trustworthiness from the space to work together with your customers to actually figure things out. And I think pretty much like 99% of the companies that are coming out there just don't have the trustworthiness that is required to really push through the noise. And from that perspective, I think it is easy to just disregard almost every single company. But if you're not seasoned in the data space as an investor, it might be hard to overcome all the noise in the space.
Sounds like you're describing a team we know well. Kidding.
Yeah.
But hey, I'm just, as you're saying this, it kind of reminds me of like the social media battles from like 2000, I don't know, 6 onward, where like it wasn't a game of picking the space. Like everyone knew social media would be a sticky thing, and MySpace had already validated this, but like it wasn't clear that Facebook would be the winner, for example. There were hundreds, right? Like I remember signing up for all these different ones because I was like, oh, I want to do the like kind of cool kid thing, like the all avant-garde thing, and not sign up for Facebook and MySpace and do some other thing. And in that sense, it's like, I guess it's like if you want to make a non-team bet, but like a principled bet about the product, like you have to make a bet on like what you think the eigen differentiation is going to be for the space as a whole, right?
I guess. I guess. Okay. So the similarities between the social media companies in the early 2000s and the data plus AI companies now is that the only thing that really matters is at the end of the day is who gets the distribution first, who gets to the network effects first, like who basically builds the standard in the space. And I guess it's business dependent. So for social media, you had a bunch of like 20-something-year-old kids like Evan Spiegel or Zuck coming up with these, or like Kevin Systrom or something like that, coming up with these new companies that really spread like wildfire, like the founder of like Telegram, et cetera, building these services. So it really helped to be young and helped to be savvy about this new paradigm. And but for the data space, I don't think that it's going to be a very young team that gets to distribution first, just because I think there are so many idiosyncratic things in the data space that prohibit you from getting to distribution. And I think a key part of that is probably data. I mean, this is very obvious. This is another P versus NP thing. We have realized that it's really hard to sell data products in a PLG fashion, just because smaller companies don't really have that many data requirements. And from that perspective, there are not that many small companies that need to adopt data systems. And if you think about that, then your traditional like young person's game of PLG and like viral growth type of situations, that is not generally going to work. And so you have to devise a way to get the trust of larger companies to give you their business. And data is a space where there's a lot of sensitivity around proprietary data. So it's really hard to get a company to open up their kimono, so to speak, and like plug in their data system to your data system. Right? It just is not so frivolous like compared to other systems. Even though like things like the CRM or something like that obviously is incredibly important data, but somehow people are okay with using like a web-based CRM, which makes no sense to me, versus like here's our data in a database and we can't connect to this system because we have all these like security hurdles. And so from that perspective, it's really like the rate limiting step to distribution is not this viral distribution methods that young people are generally good at. It's probably getting the trust of the customers. That's really the rate limiting step. Of course, that's like from a distribution standpoint. And then here, I do think that having built this system, for having thought about this, and then having actively been building this system for the past like half a year or so, it does seem like the research problem of actually figuring out how to do this hierarchical semantic segmentation, is that right? This HSS thing that you just came up with, that is actually a really hard problem. So like you have two problems. One is like you need to know the prerequisite AI and ML knowledge to actually build this hierarchical semantic segmentation algorithm to actually get to the right data and the right insights. That's number one. And then number two, you have to figure out the distribution so that people trust you in deploying these systems. These two things, it's going to be pretty hard for a really young team to tackle. So the DNA is going to be different. At the very least, you're going to need a team that really understands the nuances of machine learning and AI, as well as a team that not only gets that, but understands the sort of like is able to get the trust from the folks, the data folks required to get the distribution. So it's like a 2-part problem, which makes it doubly difficult. And from that perspective, we're a little bit bullish about our own team and trying to tackle this problem.
So what's our secret sauce, Joseph? Are we going to tell everybody?
Secret sauce is like, the hundreds of different decisions that you have to make to navigate the idea space.
That's very true. Yeah, very true. All right. Well, Joseph, you have anything else?
No, I think that's a good place to stop. Next time we'll talk about some other spicy topics like MCP and A2A and orchestrator agents and perhaps multi-agent architecture, etc. There are a lot of things to discuss. Things are moving fairly quickly.
Lots of fun stuff. Cool.
All right, Robert. We'll see you next time.
All right. Bye, Joseph.